Good evening, and thank you all for coming to this year's Fall Fling and for helping raise money for the Cystic Fibrosis Foundation. Thank you, Ashley, for giving me that wonderful introduction, and see, it wasn't that hard as you thought it was going to be. And I'd also like to thank all of our family and friends who have been coming to this event for the past 10 years. And just one more thank you to the Roosevelt Middle School. A New Jersey school to watch. And for supporting me through these many years. Even though I'm not in the school anymore, but my sister Sydney still is. So he said I gave you a shout out to him. I'm 15 years old, a typical teenager. I love games, electronic music, sleeping late, watching football, especially the Super Bowl New York Giants, arguing with my sister Cindy, one of my favorites, and arguing with my mom. A lot of things about me are just like a regular teenager, except for the fact that I have cystic fibrosis. I found out that I had cystic fibrosis when I was 5 years old. I didn't really understand what it meant, but suddenly I had to take lots of pills and do lots of chest physical therapy twice a day, which was very, very annoying. Now all the medications and physical therapy are part of my life. Even though I still think it's annoying, I don't like it. Now I realize that I must do it to stay alive. When I was 5 years old, my parents told me that eventually I was going to have to stay in the hospital at one point, so that way I could have something called the tune-up, which is where I'm not sick, but they just give me medicine to make me feel better, and to clear out anything that's in my lungs that could be harmful. A few years later, I finally had to go in the hospital, and I thought it was going to be great, because I got to miss 2 weeks from school, and my parents bought me a weed to ease down what was going to be happening in the next few days. Later on, a few days later, when I was in the hospital, I realized that it wasn't all fun. I had a PICC line, which is a tube that runs into my heart to pump IV medication throughout my body, so that way I wouldn't have to get pricked every day with a regular IV. I had to have 4 physical chest treatments every day, hands, not with the vest machine, which is a vest that goes on my body and shakes me to get rid of mucus in my body. And then this was really painful, and it was a pain on my body because every day I'd have to do this 4 times a day. I also had to do multiple medications through my lungs. I also had to have procedures like a bronchoscopy, which is where they look into my lungs to see if there's any bacteria in there. Soon later, after 2 weeks, I was able to go home. This wasn't the last time that I was out of the hospital. A few years later, in the 7th grade, I then had to go in the hospital then. And that time, it wasn't for a tune-up. I was actually very sick. That was during the time of the swine flu scare. My parents thought that I had the swine flu. They weren't quite sure. It could have been the regular flu. We didn't know. We didn't want to take any chances because with cystic fibrosis, I could get sicker than any normal person. So we went to my pediatrician. They thought it was just a virus, so they prescribed me medication. But that medication just got me sicker. So then we decided to go to my special cystic fibrosis doctor, who then told me that it was pneumonia, and then I had to go in the hospital for 2 weeks. This was a devastation to me because I remembered what the tune-up was like, and I didn't think that was going to be anything like what it was like now, because now I was actually sick, and it wasn't just a tune-up. Then I got into the hospital, and as I was right, it was 10 times worse than what I had expected before. I had to have so much more medications, different procedures, like the bronchoscopy and many more. And then it wasn't even for 2 weeks. The doctor didn't know exactly what it was, so the entire time I was on medications that wasn't treating me correctly because I didn't have pneumonia. But 4 weeks later, I finally was out of the hospital, and he found out the last day what it was. It's something called non-tuberculous mycobacterium, which is just an infectious bacteria in my lungs. And luckily, I was able to get out of the hospital, but sadly at the same time, I had another bacteria that was inside of my lungs. But that wasn't the worst of it. After that, I was sent home, everything was fine. I had a huge celebration at my home. My friends came over, and I was able to see them again after 4 weeks of not having any fun or anything like that. Then, a few weeks later, I got very sick again, worse than I was before, worse than I was when I was in the hospital. I was getting sick every day. I lost 20 pounds, and right before that, my dad made a bet with me to get to 90 pounds, but of course after that, I dropped 25 pounds, so I lost a bunch of weight. But I still got the money though, so it was all okay. But after that, I had to put on all the weight, but I couldn't because every day I would be getting sick, and then I'd be losing the weight. But then soon after, I was okay, and during this time, I couldn't go to school because I was getting very sick, and I couldn't participate in any classes because I was too weak and sick to be able to even go to school. Then later on, I was able to go back to school, and it was great. Then afterwards, a few years later, it was actually last year in December, I got my wisdom teeth out because it was blocking the molars in my mouth. So I had to get them out, but when I got the procedure done, it was a lot more complicated than I thought it was going to be. I actually had to go through surgery and get anesthesia. But they gave me this medicine to dry up secretions in my lungs. And to do this, it made me really dehydrated afterwards. And since I had cystic fibrosis, that got me very sick. And I had to go see the doctor. And this was a time right before Christmas. And my doctor told me if I didn't get better within a week, I was going to have to go to stay in the hospital for another 2 weeks. And obviously, I didn't want to stay in the hospital during Christmas. So that week, I worked really hard again. I lost a bunch of weight that I had to put on. I wasn't able to do it all in that week, but I put on some of it. I worked really hard to get myself to feel better than I was before. And then a week later, we went to the doctor, and he told me that I was all okay, and then that I could spend Christmas with my family and be happy and relaxed, not have to worry about anything with being sick. And although I've had some difficult battles with cystic fibrosis, I've been in the hospital multiple times, including having surgery, and I know that I'm one of the more fortunate people with cystic fibrosis. But I still cannot forget those who have lost their battle with CF. That's why an eating like this is so important and means so much to so many. There's still no cure for cystic fibrosis, but I hope there will be someday in the near future. I want to be able to wake up in the morning and not have to worry about doing my therapy or taking pills. I don't want to have to worry about cystic fibrosis every day. With all your help, I'm sure that we can make this reality. I would just like to make one last thank you to my mom for always being there for me, getting my medicine ready, helping with homework when I never needed it. Whenever I needed help with anything, she was always there for me, making sure that I was always okay and comfortable. And thank you all for coming.